There is a stage where most creators feel like they are doing everything right, where the thumbnails look better, the titles sound stronger, the editing feels sharper, and yet the results still fluctuate in ways that don't make sense. And this is where frustration turns into obsession because now it's no longer about effort, it's about decoding something that feels invisible, unpredictable, almost unfair. And the reality is, at this level, the difference between growth and stagnation is no longer obvious mistakes, it's subtle inefficiencies, small leaks in attention that slowly drain the performance of your video without you even noticing. Because by this point, your problem is not that people aren't clicking, it's what happens after they click, the micro moments inside your video where engagement slightly drops, where interest weakens just enough to affect the overall retention curve. And these drops may seem insignificant individually, but together they form a pattern, and that pattern determines whether your video gets pushed further or quietly fades out. And this is where the concept of retention layering becomes critical. The idea that your video should not rely on a single hook or a single idea to keep the viewer engaged, but multiple layers of engagement working together simultaneously. Visual interest, narrative tension, informational value, emotional resonance, so that even if one layer weakens momentarily, the others continue to hold the viewer in place. Most creators rely too heavily on one layer, usually information, believing that if the content is valuable enough, people will stay. But value without engagement is like having something important to say in a room where no one is listening, because attention must come first, and only then can value be delivered effectively. And then there is the illusion of length, the assumption that longer videos automatically lead to more watch time, when in reality, length only amplifies whatever is already present. If your video is engaging, longer length increases total watch time, but if your video loses attention early, longer length only magnifies the drop, making performance even worse. So the real goal is not to make longer videos, but to make videos that feel shorter than they are. Videos where time seems to pass quickly because the viewer is constantly engaged, constantly moving forward, constantly curious about what comes next, and this feeling of momentum is what separates high retention content from everything else. At the same time, your transitions become more important than your main points, because it is not the peaks that lose viewers, it is the spaces between them, the moments where energy dips, where the connection between ideas feels weak, and strong transitions eliminate these gaps, creating a seamless flow that keeps the viewer moving without friction. But beyond structure and pacing, there is something deeper, viewer psychology at scale, because as your video reaches larger audiences, you are no longer dealing with a single type of viewer, but multiple segments with different expectations, different attention spans, different interests, and your content must be flexible enough to engage all of them without losing its core identity. This is why broad appeal often comes from specific clarity, not vague generalization, because when your message is clear and strong, it resonates across different groups, while unclear or diluted content fails to fully connect with anyone, and connection is what drives engagement at every level. And then comes the tipping point, the moment where your video begins to accelerate beyond your usual reach, where impressions increase rapidly, where views start climbing faster than expected, and this is where many creators make a critical mistake. They assume the work is done, when in reality, this is where the system becomes even more sensitive to performance. Because at higher levels of exposure, competition increases, viewer expectations rise, and even small weaknesses become more visible. And if your video cannot maintain its performance under this pressure, the growth slows down, sometimes abruptly, sometimes gradually, but always noticeably. However, if your video holds strong, if retention remains stable, if engagement continues to build, the algorithm responds by pushing even harder, expanding reach further, introducing your content to entirely new audiences. And this is where true virality begins to take shape, not as a sudden spike, but as a sustained expansion. And during this phase, external factors start to amplify your growth. Shares, recommendations, discussions, people sending your video to others, embedding it in conversations, and this organic spread adds another layer of momentum that the algorithm alone cannot create, but strongly supports once it begins. And this is why emotional impact becomes increasingly important, because people don't share information, they share feelings, perspectives, moments that made them think or react. And when your video creates that kind of impact, it extends beyond passive viewing and becomes something people actively distribute. But even at this level, nothing is guaranteed, because the system continues to evaluate, continues to adjust, and a video can plateau just as quickly as it rises if it fails to maintain its performance across different segments and over time. So the real mastery lies not just in creating a video that starts strong, but in creating one that sustains strength, that adapts to different viewers, that maintains engagement from beginning to end, and that consistency is what transforms a good video into a viral one. And once you begin to understand this, once you start seeing your content as a layered system of engagement rather than a single piece of work, you gain a level of control that most creators never reach, because now you are not just creating videos, you are engineering attention at scale. And that is the moment where growth stops being unpredictable, where virality stops feeling like luck, and starts becoming a process you can influence, refine, and repeat again and again until your channel no longer depends on chance, but on design.